Foreign Secretary, can we start with the situation in the Middle East this morning? Are British forces in action?
Well, we've had British jets have been flying each night and each day to help defend partner countries against airstrikes, against the cruise missiles, against drones. And so they've been taking those defensive operations now for many days because we've got 300,000 British citizens in the countries that have been attacked by Iranian strikes in this reckless, dangerous way, including we've seen strikes on hotels and airports as well.
OK, I want to come back to ask you about the nature of defensive action at the moment, but more immediately you say we've got 300,000 people, British citizens out there. How are we doing getting those who want to leave out?
Well, over the last week, tens of thousands of people have managed to return to the UK from the region overall. There are still, however, restrictions on airspace. There are still some areas where airspace is closed. And so, of course, this is a really challenging situation. But we've been working very closely with the airlines, with the commercial airlines and with the regional governments, both to support them in getting flights back and also to make sure that there are added places for vulnerable British citizens we've been working closely with. And we've also been organising some additional charter flights. And that's particularly for those who are vulnerable, who might not be able to get one of these seats on the commercial airlines. But this is still going to take a bit of time, and we just need to recognise the scale of the issue here is much greater than we've seen in other similar areas where we've needed to get British citizens home.
But you'll understand why people there might be complaining.
Oh, it's incredibly stressful.
So far, we've only had one flight in a week. At this rate...
Well, that's actually just not right. So we've already had two charter flights return, but those are additional to the commercial flights. So we've been working with the airlines. I've spoken myself. Oh, hang on a second. I've spoken myself directly to the Emirates chief exec, to the British Airways chief exec, because it's so important for us to work with them. They are the ones who have all of the expertise to get most of the airlines back and to get flights back on to London, to Manchester, to other parts of the UK. That's what they've been doing. We've been working with them, and we've been working specifically to get particularly vulnerable cases, to get priority onto those flights. In addition, we've put on these charter flights, and we're organising further charter flights as well, but those have to be additional to the commercial airlines who we're working really closely in partnership. And that's what most other countries are doing. Most countries aren't doing charter flights at all. What they're doing is just working with the commercial airlines.
Understood, but people watching this out there will want to hear you say that the number of flights that we'll see in the next week will be ramped up from what we've seen in the last few days.
So we've already seen that. So that's why we've now seen tens of thousands of people who have managed to return to the UK over the last week since this conflict started. And also that's particularly, look, the biggest area, of course, for British citizens is around Dubai. We've seen a significant increase in the flights coming back from Dubai.
All right. Does it bother you that Tony Blair thinks that you should have supported the American attack from day one rather than waiting until Sunday night?
Well, in the end, we have to act in the UK's national interest. That's what this Prime Minister has been doing. That's what Keir Starmer has been doing. And that is why the UK did not provide support for the first initial strikes led by the US and Israel. But once we saw the Iranian strikes, reckless strikes on partner countries, we have provided defensive support for those countries, including the base support for the US.
It took you a while, and the person who's been most experienced at all of this says that he thinks you waited too long. Does it bother you? Is he just wrong?
I would say I just disagree. I think, look, there were two clear decisions here, whether to support the initial strikes and action that took place at a time when we had been pursuing diplomatic processes and negotiations which we thought should continue, and there was that first decision to take. We decided, the Prime Minister decided, and I fully supported him, that was not in the UK's national interest. And then we had a second request to provide defensive support at a time when partner countries countries in the Gulf were facing strikes.
Okay.
And again, we took a decision in the UK's national interest. But you're specifically asking, look, I would just say this, there are some people in politics who think that we should always agree with the US, whatever. There are other people in politics who think we should never take action with the US, again, whatever the circumstances. I don't think either of those positions is in the UK national interest. And it is the responsibility for Keir Starmer to act in the UK's national interest for British citizens. That's what he's been doing.
Are you calling Tony Blair a poodle?
I think the point is to make sure that actually we learn the lessons from some of the things that went wrong in Iraq, and I think that is exactly what Keir Starmer's done, and to make sure we've got military action taking place as we speak to defend countries that are facing Iranian strikes, because that is in the British national interest, but we don't do things that are not in the British national interest.
We are talking friendly fire here. Early in the week, the President said of Keir Starmer, this is not Winston Churchill we're dealing with. He called the Prime Minister a loser, and last night he said, we don't need people joining wars after we've already won. Now, will the Prime Minister just shrug his shoulders at these remarks, which some people might say are as much an insult to the nation as they are to him personally?
Well, the thing I've learnt doing this job is that you have to focus on substance and not on social media posts. And that's the important way to do this.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
not
US
anybody's social media post. It's not some bloke in a basement who, writing 100, whatever it is, 240 characters. This is the President of the United States. He says, our Prime Minister is a loser, didn't turn up when he should have done. You guys are no longer our friends. By the way, when did the Prime Minister last speak to the President?
Well, the US President has the responsibility to do what he thinks is right in the US national interest. The UK Prime Minister has the responsibility to do what he thinks is right in the UK's national interest. That means sometimes we will disagree. And there are many areas where our security partnership remains incredibly strong, and I have seen myself the close intelligence cooperation, the close military cooperation. But there will also be areas where we disagree. So, for example, we had disagreed on Greenland. We disagreed on the initial strikes that took place and whether the UK should provide the basing support for them. But that is a legitimate thing for the UK Prime Minister to do, and frankly, that is actually about defending the UK national interest.
Completely legitimate. I understand the diplomatic speak, but in English, Donald Trump is wrong.
Well, we disagreed on a series of issues. There are also a lot of areas that we agree on. And we do agree, for example, that Iran should not be able to develop nuclear weapons.
Don't you think you ought to send back as clear a message to him as he's sending to us? He's telling us we are a bunch of wimps. Why don't you just say straightforwardly, get out of here, you're wrong?
As you'll know, Keir Starmer's style of doing politics is obviously very different. And I think that kind of calm,
we're in a new world order here. Be straight.
The calm, cool-headed approach to these big, serious international issues, do you know, I really think that is right. And we're not going to do things in terms of the rhetoric or hyperbole. We're going to do things on really practical, calm, steady decision-making, because I think that is actually the British character, more widely, is to do things in a serious and steady way. That's what we're going to do.
It's also the British character to solve disagreements over a cup of tea, direct chat. When did the Prime Minister last speak to the President? I don't think I heard an answer to that.
The Prime Minister does speak to the President frequently.
But when did he last speak to him?
I wouldn't comment on the details and timings. The Prime Minister does speak to the President.
Has he spoken to him in the last week?
Frequently. He speaks to the President frequently, as you'll know.
He didn't speak to him since last Saturday, according to the public record.
Well, you know, he continues to have conversations and will continue to do so.
People watching this would say, special relationship. It's not that special if in the midst of a crisis where the British are sending air forces, putting our troops at risk and so on, there is not a conversation between our head of government and the American head of government.
Well, the thing about this special relationship is it's deep. It goes back generations. I first got briefed... No, I think this is important. I first got briefed by the CIA, went to the Pentagon and so on, about the intelligence cooperation between our countries more than 25 years ago. and it has strengthened in depth and collaboration ever since. So that structural cooperation is happening every single day, every minute of the day.
I get all of that.
That is immensely important. It's important to our security, and it will continue.
I get all that. OK, I'll give us one more go. Your children would say the Prime Minister is being ghosted by Mr Trump.
Well, you know, if you want to conduct diplomacy through social media, that's one thing. That is not our style.
That's what this president does. That's how we know what he thinks. I mean, come on.
And the government has a different way of doing that.
All right.
And I think that's OK. I think it's right for us to give these serious issues the gravity that they deserve.
All right, let's deal with the substance of this. Prime Minister says that we watched this build up, we anticipated this conflict days ago and so on. Well, let me just ask you a bit of a factual thing. Is it right that the frigate, the Type 45 destroyer, HMS Dragon, is going to set sail on Tuesday?
That is going to be heading for the Mediterranean, but you wouldn't expect me to comment on operational details around timings and things like that.
All right, well, can you say anything about the report that it is now... One of the reasons for delay was apparently that it's now being fitted for months at sea rather than weeks, and that therefore we're anticipating this conflict going on much longer than anybody thought at the beginning.
I'm not going to comment on the operational details around HMS Dragon. I do think it's unknown at the moment what the course of this conflict is going to be. We obviously want to see as swift a resolution as possible that provides regional security and stability, but we don't currently know what the course of the conflict is going to be.
The reason all this matters is that both Mr Trump and also the Gulf states, the Gulf Cooperation Council, have said pretty clearly that they think that we as a country look unprepared. We're turning up late. We weren't ready to help them. The Prince of Wales, which is one of our two carriers, is now on 5 days' notice to head to the region. But we haven't even made a decision now, 9 days in, whether we're going to send our biggest asset into this theatre. It feels like we are dithering to these people.
Well, I just strongly disagree with that, and you'll have heard interviews with the Chief of Defence Staff.
You may disagree, but that's what they think.
I know, well, I'm explain why. I strongly disagree with that assertion, and I've spoken to many of our Gulf partners. We have many discussions over the course of the last 10 days, and detailed discussions as well, and know how closely we are working in partnership. So we took action between January and February to pre-deploy, because of the regional tensions that were growing, to increase our deployments to the region.
You say we took action to pre-deploy. We didn't. We didn't actually deploy them.
Hang on, we moved F-35s and Typhoons to the region. 400 additional personnel were deployed, again, to the region to ensure that we had better capabilities in place. We increased our deployments of radar and air defence equipment to Cyprus in advance of anything happening, in order to respond to what we could see happening with the regional tensions. Since the conflict has started, and we've seen the scale of the response, this reckless response from the Iranian regime, which frankly has shocked the Gulf countries who were no part in those initial strikes and have found themselves receiving these missile strikes and drones. Since then, we have gone further, and we've also sent Wildcats, we've sent helicopters, we've sent the additional Typhoons to Qatar. And so that is important. We've responded to the escalation.
All of this, I understand, but they are saying it's not enough. We don't, and the Cypriots were incandescent. They were outraged that Akrotiri came under attack, and it's still going to take days for us to get there. Look, just to be absolutely, can I just ask you to be clear about one thing? Dragon is going to be in theatre. Will Prince of Wales end up in theatre?
So, again, I'm not going to get into the operational decisions on that. And as you'll know, that the Prime Minister had previously announced that the carrier strike group would also be heading to the High North as well. So there are other issues involved, and I'm not going to...
So High North is more important than this?
I'm not going to comment on those operational decisions. What I can tell you is the decisions that have been taken already and what is being deployed.
Of course, what the soldiers would say is this is exactly what they've been warning about, that actually we've cut back on effectively on our assets. So we're in a situation where you think, reasonably, you've got two priorities. What do we do about the High North, the Russians and so on? What do we do about the Middle East? But we've got to choose. We can't do both.
So is there a bigger picture?
That's a reality.
So is there a bigger picture here in which the security threats have grown? That is absolutely right. Are we also dealing with an inheritance in which the previous government cut defence spending and actually has hollowed out the defence investment that we inherited? That is what we inherited. That is exactly why we've now had the biggest increase in defence.
With generals who said that our military's been hollowed out.
So I think there is a long-term issue as to what the Conservatives did to our defence, and we've said that many times. That is not new. What I can say, though, is what this Labour government has done in response, which is the biggest increase in defence spending since the Cold War, substantially increasing our investment and expanding that support, because we know we have to respond to security threats and also taking some difficult decisions, including on international aid, to do so.
I want to ask you about something very specific. Do you find it alarming that the drone that struck near Krateri was partly built with Russian technology and components?
There is a serious issue of concern, the collaboration between Russia and Iran over a long time on some of these issues. We know we have faced threats to our security in Europe from Russia. We see that in Ukraine, but also more widely, those threats to Europe as well. And of course, now we're seeing the Iranian threats play out in the Middle East and in the Gulf as well. It's part of a bigger pattern around security and why
got nothing to do with
respond.
us. The Russians are saying it's got nothing to do with us.
And look, I can't comment on the detail of what the particular situations are. What I can say is there is a bigger pattern of cooperation between Russia and Iran.
Last time you and I spoke, we discussed the death of the dissident Alex Navalny in Russia. I spoke to the Russian ambassador a couple of days ago for this programme, and I put your words to him, and here is what he said. Our Foreign Secretary spoke to our programme just a few weeks ago, and she had absolutely no doubt that this was in some way, shape or form the act of the Russian state.
Do you think that we have got this frog from this South America? Tell me, please.
Well, I think her point was that no one else had the capacity to bring in that kind of toxin.
I will tell you that we have here in London six places who are selling this type of done it synthetically, which is based on these frog poisons.
Nothing to do with you guys?
Nothing to do with us.
What is your response to Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, the Russian regime had the means and the motive. We know that there was evidence of the Russian regime having been involved with that kind of lethal poison, and Alexander Navalny was in a Russian prison. They had the means and the motive, and we had clear evidence, and it's why we stood with a group of other countries, because we had done that detailed research, that got that detailed evidence. And once again, they are not taking responsibility for the way in which they pursue anyone who speaks up against their regime, and all they try to do is misinformation and obfuscation. But we are clear about what the evidence shows.